camera.
So
It goes into your hard drive under Library, ColorSync Profiles. On Windows, it's in System 32. What's that?
When do you apply this thing, the profile?
We'll get to that at the
we'll
next
get
step.
to that.
Yeah. So we shot the target. We've white balanced. We've shot the target. We've got it evenly lit. We've got no reflections. We process it through this software.
How are you doing on time?
I think we're okay. We're getting pretty close. Okay. So the rest of these software packages, the reason hard with that is they do the same thing, but they have a lot fewer options. This is the in-camera software. It's very inexpensive. I think it's like a couple $100 or something. I don't remember. It supports a lot of different kinds of targets, tons and tons of them. You load the image. It's actually a Photoshop plugin. So you open a picture. You go to Filter. You open this filter. You crop it out. You hit OK. You tell it what kind of a target you're shooting. It loads the reference file, or you can load your own. But one nice thing I really like about this software, see this little check capture button right here? It loads this. You can then apply an overlay of uniformity. And it shows you if these are pink or these are blue, how bright or dark they are. It then calculates how bright or dark, how much average error you have. So I spent hours trying to get this thing evenly lit, and I'm still off by a little under 2% overall, but I've got one that's almost 4% off. This one down here, the very bottom corner. But it's very useful in that you can then check that. I actually use this piece of software just for this feature. The Colorize software, as far as I can tell, doesn't allow you to crop things that aren't square. I could be wrong, but I just tend to just put up a grid here and just tweak it a tiny bit. So it's either rotate it or distort it slightly to take out any lens distortion. You again load the target in. You tell it where the corners are. You load your reference file, and you hit Create. It's got one option that allows it to override the camera's luminosity and gray balance. And then their manual, it tells you, do not use this option unless you don't have white balance in your camera or you have something really strange going on. Because the idea is that if you ideally produce profiles that just correct for the color, you can then make your images brighter or darker, but it will correct the hue of blue because it always sees blue as too purple. That's my idea of a perfect profile. It might not be yours. But I like that piece of software because of that reason, that it's specifically talking about color response, not brightness and contrast, unless you uncheck that box. OK, so this is one of the color calibration scripts. They, again, work with a lot of different targets. You open your raw file, and you click Open. It needs to open in Photoshop as a raw file, not as a Photoshop or a TIFF file that you've exported. You use your pen tool to set the four corners, and you go to Scripts, and you open your calibration script. This particular one has 8 million options. Go ahead and play with them all. They take hours. This is an OK option. I think I might have normally put in the exposure patch correction. But yeah, they're very poorly documented. These are freeware programs, but they do some fairly cool things. And the main things they do is tell you if your exposure's off. They do a lot of things that aren't just about color. So they have a unique place. If you were, for example, reproducing artwork, this could be more useful than the Color Checker Passport software or the Adobe Digital Negative Correction, because it tells you in Camera Raw, your contrast needs to be 38%, not 50. Your brightness needs to be 12, not 25, or whatever. Very, very specific numbers, because it has a reference for what the real world looks like. Keep in mind, though, that might not actually be a pretty picture.
Where do you get these scripts?
If you want to know, email me, and I'll send you the link. Or I have it here. You can write it down. There's only a few people that make them, and they're not being updated very often. But at least that particular one does a very good job with that target. I've only tested it with that one. But on your nice new 22 megapixel camera, you have to do 20 different rounds of checking and rechecking. It could take hours. On my 8 megapixel camera, with only 6 passes, it takes it about an hour. So, you know, they could, you know, it's an involved process. And then if you want to try slightly different options, it starts over again. All right, so this is if you're in Lightroom and you have the Color Checker Passport, you just click Install, you know, normal, hit OK. Open Lightroom, you go to Export, and right there you've got a new option called Color Checker Passport. You can either right-click on a picture or you can go to File Export. This software only supports this in Lightroom, and it also works with a DNG file that you could technically produce from a different software, definitely Photoshop or Lightroom, but in theory it could be used in other software packages as well. You put in the name of what your profile is going to be, and you click Export. That's it. Very straightforward. It doesn't ask you anything. It's also possible, like you said, with the 2 light things, if you have daylight, you actually shoot the target under 2 different light sources, ideally very different ones. You know, really blue light, outdoor and shade, indoor, under a really, you know, yellow light, and you just select them both. Just, you know, shift-click on both images and click Export, and it will then load both of them and produce a curve that will compensate for each of those depending on your white balance. Now, if you're going to be working in Photoshop, you just go to Export. You go to Save, and instead of saving a TIFF file or a JPEG, you save a DNG file. You literally just drag it on here, you crop the corners, and you hit Create. And you ask, you know, it gives you a name. This is Canon 20D. It was daylight, whatever your setting is. It's also possible if you click on this dual illuminant that you actually drag 2 different pictures. So I've done one under daylight here and one under indoor light here. You crop them both. You can switch back and forth by clicking on which one you're on. And then when you hit Create, you just now created one just for the 20D, not a specific light, because it'll blend the 2 nicely for you.
So you end up with one profile in the end?
Yes, yes, yeah. That combines those 2 very different, and that's why they need to be different. If they were just slightly different, it would have really hard idea knowing what's going on anywhere but those very specific area. It might be really accurate in that area, though. I don't know. I didn't try that. That's not the idea behind it. Adobe, so this is a free product that Adobe produced a number of years ago, does virtually the same thing, but it supports the older color checker, and I don't know if that means that if you already have one of these, this would be a better software tool. Got a lot more controls. You can change the curve, make the image more contrasty, whatever, but the key thing is you go to Chart, you go to File Open, and this little window opens up, and you click on the corners again. Getting the concept here, we just tell it where the things are. So now it knows, oh, I should have seen brown. There's brown, but it's a little dark. Oh, I should have seen blue. Oh, but it's a little too saturated. Whatever it needs, you tell it which of the 2, again, these always have 2 light sources, you're correcting for, and you click Create. You then go up to File, and you hit Save. You save it as whatever, name of the camera. It's also possible to go to the color table area here and tell it which of the 2, either daylight or indoor, that you're correcting, and then you load that image in. All right. Okay. So if you're working in Photoshop, key things, basic interface here. This is where you load that profile once you created it, right here in this little calibration panel. See that? It's kind of hard to see. I think I'll blow it up here in the next step. Okay. Let me go back to, all right, white balance, key things. White balance is here. You've got all your brightness and contrast. And then under calibration, you've got your profile you just made. Now, if you did a calibration script, instead of having this changed, you would have your stock one there, but all of these would be moved around slightly, specific to your camera. They accomplish those similar things, but instead of being one click, If you wanted to change them or move these into light